I was ready to give up, but then God sent a miracle. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. It was one of those heavy, cloud-covered mornings where everything seemed gray, both inside and out. Life had been pulling me down for months, and the weight of my struggles was becoming unbearable. At that point, giving up felt easier than continuing the fight. The bills were piling up, my relationships were strained, and my faith, my once unshakable faith, was hanging by a thread. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to be the strong one, the one who had it all figured out. My family depended on me, and here I was, barely able to hold myself together. I had prayed and prayed for a way out, for God to give me a sign, a brainy thing. But nothing came. At least that's what I thought. It all started that morning as I stared blankly out the window, clutching a cold cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. I sighed, letting out a deep breath I didn't realize I was holding. I whispered a prayer I had said 1,000 times before. God, if you're there, if you're listening, I need you now. I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. Honestly, it wasn't even a prayer anymore. It was more like a desperate plea. I wasn't even sure if I believed the words coming out of my mouth, but I said them anyway, because that's what you do, right? You pray, and you wait, and you hope. Except I wasn't hoping anymore. Not really. Just as I was about to lose myself in my own thoughts again, I heard a knock at the door. Great, I muttered. One more thing to deal with. I shuffled to the door, expecting it to be the mailman with another bill I couldn't pay, or worse, a neighbor with another complaint about the state of my overgrown lawn. But when I opened the door, I was greeted by something I never expected. A package. No return address, no name. Just a plain, brown box with my name on it. Okay, God, if this is a bomb or something weird, I'm blaming you, I joked, trying to lighten my own mood. But the truth was, I was curious. I had no idea who would send me something, especially without a name. I brought the package inside, grabbed a kitchen knife, and sliced the tape open. Inside was a small white envelope. My hands shook as I picked it up, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nerves. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. Written on it in the neatest handwriting I had ever seen were the words, "Don't give up. Your miracle is coming." I let out a half laugh, half cry. Is this some kind of joke? I asked, looking around my empty kitchen as if someone would jump out and say, "Gotcha!" But no one did. I sat down at the table, staring at the note. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, I felt something stir inside me, a flicker of hope, perhaps. But just as quickly, doubt crept back in. I slumped in my chair, shaking my head. A miracle, huh? Sure. I'll believe it when I see it. I tried to brush off the note, convincing myself it was nothing more than a prank or some kind of strange coincidence. But as the days went by, things didn't get better. They got worse. First, my car broke down on the way to work. Then, I found out I was getting laid off from my job. To top it all off, I got a call from my landlord saying that if I didn't pay the rent by the end of the week, I'd have to move out. I was done. That flicker of hope I had felt when I received the note, gone. Completely snuffed out. I remember collapsing on my bed that night, crying like I hadn't cried in years. God, I can't do this anymore, I sobbed. I'm done. I need you to show up or I'm walking away. I'm serious this time. I wiped my tears and stared at the ceiling, waiting for some sort of divine intervention. But once again, there was silence. I eventually fell asleep, exhausted, with no answers and no hope. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, determined to make it through the day somehow. I threw on some clothes and headed to the local coffee shop, my go-to place when I needed to clear my head. As I stood in line, I noticed an older woman sitting at a table in the corner. She was smiling softly to herself, sipping her coffee and flipping through a Bible. There was something about her that caught my eye. Something peaceful, almost radiant. I got my coffee and found a seat near her, not really paying attention to anything around me. But then, out of nowhere, she spoke. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but confident. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I feel like I'm supposed to tell you something." I looked up, startled. "Me?" She nodded. "Yes. I was praying this morning, and I felt God telling me that I would meet someone today who needed to hear this." She opened her Bible and pointed to a verse. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. Tears welled up in my eyes and I couldn't speak. How did she know? How did she know that was exactly what I needed to hear? I sat there speechless as she smiled and closed her Bible. God hasn't forgotten you, she said, her eyes kind and knowing. Your miracle is on its way. I walked out of that coffee shop with a strange sense of peace. It was as if God himself had spoken to me through that woman. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. And wouldn't you know it? That very same afternoon, I got a call from an old friend offering me a job. Not just any job, but one that paid better than the one I had lost and allowed me to work from home. I couldn't believe it. I cried again, but this time they were tears of joy. Over the next few weeks, things started to turn around. The landlord gave me an extension on my rent, and I managed to pay it off in full after my first paycheck from the new job. My car got fixed for a fraction of what I expected, thanks to a kind mechanic who just happened to have the right parts on hand. And the strain in my relationships began to heal as I leaned more into God and trusted him with everything. Looking back, I can see that God was there the whole time, even when I thought he wasn't. He was working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for my good, just like Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. It wasn't easy. There were moments I wanted to give up, moments I almost did. But in the end, God showed up, just like he always does. And that mysterious note, I still don't know who sent it. But I do know this, it wasn't just a coincidence. It was a reminder that God's timing is perfect, even when it feels like he's silent. Now, whenever I feel like giving up, I remember that day, the day I was ready to throw in the towel, but then God sent me a miracle. And while it didn't come in the way I expected, it came at the exact moment I needed it most. So if you're in a place right now where you feel like giving up, take it from someone who's been there. Don't give up. Keep praying, keep hoping, and keep trusting. Because your miracle, it's coming. God never abandons his children, and his plans for us are good, even when we can't see them. As Psalm 27:14 says, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. And trust me, when the miracle arrives, it'll be worth the wait.